So I'm Maria and I look after environment as general within the whole of the southern region. So my team looks after the routes and capital delivery world, and I look after risk and assurance and also do training and briefings. Love doing sessions like this. And when I got the title about sustainability challenges, it did feel like, oh, have you got all evening? Because there's loads of them. But yeah, what I did think about putting in and leading it through, and please forgive me, because some people will have seen some of these slides on. Hopefully, it will take them back to their training days that we've had recently. If it's all to get it to people. There we go. Perfect. So first of all, there's a piece around what is sustainability and so what. And there's lots of definitions that are around. There's a definition that comes from Brundtland that is an old definition about sustainable development and it meeting the needs of the future without impacting the needs that we have, so what are we doing around sustainability? The lovely definition I like is enough for all forever. But one of the things around sustainability I quite like is these circles, because without the environment, we wouldn't have the societal bit and we wouldn't be able to have the economy and have our resources and barter, move things around. So the environment is important to us because it gives us lots of different things. And I suppose the whole so what piece is the slide in the right-hand corner there about, so what is the issue with this? Sustainability is such a large topic. So under environment, we talk about ecology and we talk about resources, and under society we talk about health and well-being and communities and diversity and inclusion. And then under economy, if I'm bringing it into our world, we've got things like minimum viable products that we talk about, but actually are we making sure that we cover all of the other aspects? But we have this thing called planetary boundaries. So the Stockholm resilience team got together and they identified 9 planetary boundaries. They were saying these are key things within the environment that we need to think about, from climate change to ocean acidification to chemical pollutants, land use, biodiversity loss, and what are we doing about those and what is the impact that we're having. But what research has also shown is it's fine to just look at the environmental bits. That's one of the circles within sustainability. But what about the social elements? So actually, we want to make sure everyone has enough food, that they have shelter, that they have a voice, that there's gender equality, that they have housing, that there's education available to them, energy. And so they had this thing around what they call the donut model. So the green bit on the slide is called the donut. So we want to be inside that light green, and that's, I suppose, in a way, utopia. So we don't want to make sure that we've got shortfalls in our social equality, and we don't want to make sure that we've overshot our issues. And as you can see by the slide, there are 4 areas under sustainability, under that environmental planetary boundaries, that we've overshot already, which is climate change, biodiversity loss. So we've lost 50% of our biodiversity since the 1970s, land use and what we're using land for, and the fact of how much nitrogen and phosphorus we've put into the environment. And just to give you an idea, so this is what I happened to see the other day on LinkedIn and thought, oh, this is perfect to illustrate. So they had it in 2019. So it was about 3 planetary boundaries that had been crossed. In 15, it was 4 planetary boundaries. And now they're saying this year we have exceeded 6 planetary boundaries. So that is climate change, putting things into the atmosphere, air quality, fresh water, so the impact that we're having on fresh water, biochemicals, so that bit about nitrogen and phosphorus, and novelty entries. So those things that we think are really good, and then all of these other chemicals or things that we found that then become and have an impact on us. So that's the so what piece. We know we're having an impact. And a couple of years ago, they said they've done all the studies, they've looked at it all, and they're 90% sure that humans are having an impact on the climate. So rather than them being skeptical, saying, oh, well, and some of the engineers, I know you will have done geology, my background is geology, so we talk about millions of years and we talk about soil structures and go through ice ages, but there is very clear data and statistics around the impact that we're having. And each year, and I won't go through all of these slides, I've got a separate slide next to talk about ecological footprinting, but I'm going to skip over that, but I've included it in case anyone is interested. But each year we have an overshoot day. So this is the day that we've used up the resources that would be available to us in 1 year. So in 2023, we had overshot on the 2nd of August. I mean, the date has shifted, it's good, because in the past it's been July, so we have shifted, we're getting further down, but you can see, you know, if you're in Qatar and Luxembourg, you've used all your resources for that year by February. So it's about, you know, that consumption, consumerism, how we are managing those particular areas. And then what can we do? So the idea is, can we shift that overshoot day? Can we get, you know, can we get closer to Jamaica and Cuba and all of those areas which aren't using the resources that Qatar and Luxembourg are? And just to give you an idea, so for the UK, our overshoot day was the 19th of May this year, as was it last year and in 2021, and it was the 16th of May in 2020. So we're hovering around mid-May for our overshoot days that we have. And this is just giving you a little bit of detail on ecological footprints. I can put that slide in should anyone want to know sort of a bit about the whole way they calculate that. But what I thought was quite interesting, and I've seen a few different graphs, and I've put this together, the iceberg. So I get slightly frustrated in the sustainability world that we talk a lot about carbon and carbon emissions, but actually this whole bit that we don't see with the iceberg is all the other things around sustainability. So whether it's about water management, water resource, air quality, land use, heritage, diversity, and equality, communities, all of those other bits that sit under here. And you see, and rightly or wrongly, everyone was in uproar at the decision that we're going to change when we ban diesel cars. It's like, oh, it's all about the emissions. Whereas for me, I think it's about that consumerism and that whole wants and needs. Do I need 2 phones? You know, do I need 2 laptops? So, you know, do we need all of the latest things? And it's so difficult because, yeah, we'll have a work laptop, we might have a home laptop. And then, you know, if you've got children, well, they all need, you know, one has to have an iPad and the other, you can't share those. But, you know, are we thinking about those things? And someone said to me the other day, actually, they'd looked at how much food waste. I have a niece and nephew, and I just like go, do you not want to eat any more of that? Because, like, that's 3/4 of the plate that has been left. And you're not going to eat it, so it's going to go in the bin. So it's that kind of all of those various things. Then where does that food waste go? Okay, can we turn it into waste to energy or composting, or does it go into a landfill? So I think that's the thing, is that often people see this carbon thing and, oh, you're not doing the right thing for carbon. But is there a wider picture, and should we be looking at it from a wider context? And then globally, what they're doing, and they put this together in 2015. The UN got together and put together these 17 sustainable development goals, and that was to include environment and social aspects. And we've tried to map where ours are. So there are ones about health and well-being and gender equality. So within Network Rail, the programmes we have around the health and well-being piece, the bit that we do around sort of the recruitment. We had a discussion just before I came here today about the recruitment campaign to get females into the industry. All of those various bits that we do are social bits of working with homelessness. And I suppose from an engineering perspective and in our railway bit, the innovations and the works we do and the collaboration. So you already talked about going to Southampton University and seeing the works that they're going to do and the innovative things that they're doing around that. So how does that help with like those partnerships between industry and education to look at what you can do and how we're working together? So there's all lots of things that interlink when it comes to sustainability. So that's, yeah, globally and how we link. So then in Southern, what we do, and I suppose just to bring it back, we have within Network Rail a national environmental sustainability strategy, which is currently being refreshed and reviewed. But it talks about being a low emissions railway, resilient to climate change. And again, I mean, having come to work in Southern, I used to work for Signalling Southern before it was disbanded. We didn't have so much of an issue apart from normally local cabinets being constructed in a floodplain and then realising we needed to put them on a stilts on a platform. But I've noticed since being in Southern, as soon as it rains or we get some warm, you know, the embankments start slipping or we have those impacts. So again, although, you know, climate change, how are we managing our infrastructure to help us? And are there things like biodiversity that could help us manage our infrastructure? It was interesting, I saw something, I think it was on LinkedIn, about what they were doing when you've got grass in a field and how it allows things to filtrate through so you don't get muddy water, and depending on the types of grasses you were using to what the filtration was. So all of these things people are thinking about, again, to minimise pollution, but also like siltation and things like that. Whereas we would have those problems if things are going into drainage channels and blocking up our drainage channels and causing flooding. So we have that. There's some stuff around biodiversity and minimising the waste we generate. So can we look at what we need to do? And then we also have a separate social value framework, which is looking at economic prosperity, equal opportunities, well-being, and COVID recovery. So how do we get resilient? So in there, we will have things about apprenticeships and all of those various aspects. And now, so this bit, I have just gone through a couple of examples of the sort of things that we do within the environment. So if you've ever heard of it, so we have a thing called a rail carbon tool. So RSSB hosts a rail carbon tool. And the whole idea is, can we look at our designs? How can we influence our designs? So this is looking at a retaining structure at Bunces Farm. And on the screen, you have 3 different options. So you have the first option, which is the gabion baskets. And the biggest carbon output there is the gabion stone, and then the mash baskets. We then go to a king post retaining wall structure, where the biggest proportion is the steel H bars, with a bit of concrete and a bit of the precast. And then the third option is a vegetated retaining wall structure. So the biggest bit comes from the geogrid element and a little bit from the bags. But if you can see from the data, the highest carbon generating is the king post retaining wall structure. The vegetated retaining wall structure has the lowest carbon when you're looking at those various aspects of, so are there things we can do? Now, at times, we want that king post retaining structure because from a risk perspective, but actually, are there some areas on our infrastructure where we could use a vegetated retaining structure because actually we're needing that structure for a different purpose? Or, you know, is there the option? I mean, the gaping baskets are still quite high from a carbon perspective, but slightly lower than the king post. So those sort of bits. And what is interesting with this one, the vegetated retaining wall structure not only has carbon savings, it also saves on the biodiversity piece.
I can hide that. So just if we pause for a second. Get it on the screen. Oh, sorry, I'll jump.
No, I don't think it was that.
No, sorry.
Okay. I'll go back then, sorry.
Sorry for those in the room who can't see the bottom left hand corner.
Yeah. Basically, the top bit shows us that for the king posts and the gabions, we've got some significant biodiversity loss because we're going to have to remove the vegetation and the habitat. There will be some natural regrowth around those areas, but the vegetated retaining wall structure, not only does it have carbon benefits, it provides us with a significant biodiversity net gain. So is there something that we're able to do around those particular bits? So I've just pulled out those as if we're looking at design, are we challenging design to consider those bits? Other things, and I'm just going to, like I said, go through some examples. Some of you may be aware. Embankment failures, these things I've realised happen quite a bit. And sometimes we have to move a lot of earth. So how are we moving that earth? Can we think about those things? So in this example, they were able to use trains, which took just under 1,500 lorries off the road. So you think in some areas where we need to go and do our embankment works, they are through small villages, or the road networks aren't particularly brilliant. So are there things, because we don't want to disrupt our neighbours and cause disruption there. So that social element. And because they were able to reuse the material on site, it didn't have to get sent off. So potentially to landfill or wherever they needed it to go off site. So it's managing those particular ones. I mean, some of these you will know more about than me. So anchor post systems. I don't know loads about anchor post systems, but there is some real positives around anchor post systems and the savings. So as it says on the slide there, and I'll read for the people in the room because we're slightly blocked, there's a 60% time saving for foundation installation. And I know sometimes we are restricted when we have access. There was a 40% cost saving, and that was to do with people hours, elimination of plant requirements and possession requirements, again, where we're stuck for access. Are we helping? A 73% embodied carbon reduction. So again, we're reducing carbon, eliminated the use of concrete. So also there's health and safety benefits there that you're not having to deal with other areas. And there were a number of benefits that that particular project saw from using those. So these things are around, and how do we get that out and share it? Recycled plastic sleepers. I didn't realise, so maybe you guys did know this. I was on a call. We have a sleeper working group that are looking at all these different things. I'm like, could you let us know? Because we're quite happy to promote these things from an environmental benefit. For those of you who are in Network Rail, and I will try and share the video. I've got to work out how I share it because it's on Connect. There's a little video around the plastic sleepers and the composite sleepers. So there's an article on my Connect around this. But again, it's thinking about those particular things. And some of it may be driven from a financial perspective. So we want to drive efficiencies, which is fine. There's an economic bit to that sustainability element, and all businesses want to be sustainable. So how do we have that edge? So again, looking at how much money we can save when it comes to materials, but also what we can do and the carbon savings. So traditionally, timber and concrete sleepers account for 24% of railways' carbon emissions when building the railway. So that's quite a significant portion. Then what's about a quarter is to do with things like concrete sleepers or timber sleepers. And the other benefits is that if we're using a recycled material, we're taking that out of the waste stream. So there isn't that need to get rid of that material, but also we're not having, you know, if it's timber sleepers, apparently I didn't realise we get our timber sleepers from Brazil. Now, could that be fueling some deforestation? You know, how well is it managed? Do we know how it works through the supply chain? I mean, there are processes and schemes in place to make sure those things are available, but actually looking at all those alternatives means that, do those forests in Brazil stay, provide an ecosystem that actually benefits more than just Brazil? But again, we also need to look at things like, and that's fine, but how do we then impact on those people who are employed in Brazil to produce sleepers? So there's a fine balance between those particular aspects, or are they taken to work in conservation? We've also on a number of different occasions, this is from Gatwick Project, been able to reduce the carbon. So we've used low carbon concrete, again, providing those savings. And I know we have to look at product approval and what the material is being used for and where, but again, can we challenge those particular aspects? And they will sometimes have cost savings in there, as well as the carbon savings that we have. The next one I feel is a little bit controversial based on some stuff that has come out from Root Services recently, but I'm still going to show it. Cable recycling. So what can we do with all of this? Well, one of our contractors basically turned it into this. So they removed the rubber and processed the rubber and changed it into a children's playground. And here's a bit of the data. So it was Siva Rail, basically from the project there, had taken the cable, and they had put together a whole process of cleaning and stripping the cable out, and then making sort of chips out of the material, and then granulating the material, making it safe to be able to produce a composite material for children's playgrounds. And we installed it at one of the nearby playgrounds. And the playground or the school they picked was one in a particularly deprived area. So it helped, again, if you've got a nice vibrant playground, you know, that aesthetics as well, looking at those and the positive bits. But again, you're then taking that material out of the waste stream, using it for a beneficial reason, but also by improving that school and their playground, we've added some social value to the area. So there's that other benefit of bringing in, oh, actually, that looks, you know, does it lift the area? Does it make it better for the children for education? Because actually they've got a really nice playground, so they've got a nice safe space. All of those sort of linked in benefits that are sometimes difficult to quantify. Some of the other ones, really simple ones that we've used on site, having battery cubes. So if we're working from a construction point of view, are we looking at different types of equipment? Because if we're looking at different types of equipment, you know, it's not as noisy. So then are we having a positive impact on our line side neighbours? I know the works delivery teams and also some of the routes have looked at battery operated equipment. Again, I know there's obviously that double-edged sword of the lithium batteries, and there's still things we need to do with that. But again, if you're not having to diesel on site to refuel your equipment, then you're not having the potential for oil spills and therefore contaminating the ground or watercourses. And a number of our projects have been using these sort of solar tainers as power for their sites, and a number of different ones have used that. And again, this was in quite a residential area, but it's that positive of we're doing something different. It's not just the noisy generator. And again, we've used things like sem-free concrete, which has carbon reduction benefits. So there's a number of different things that we can do. And it was just to show you there's a couple of ideas. And sometimes for us, like in the capital delivery world, it's about challenging the designers, thinking about those things. You know, can they come with a different solution? Have they got something that they can bring to the engineers? Is there something? One of the things that we were talking about with some of the SID works is, you know, is there an opportunity to say, well, this is the hierarchy, and you have to go down the hierarchy and you have to justify why you're using, you know, the least environmentally friendly or the least carbon benefit. And I know there's quite a bit of work going on with the asset teams now to what goes into their remits, what's their objectives, you know, because if it's track, it's very carbon focused. If we're talking about line side, off track, and the maintenance bits there, actually there's a lot of vegetation works that go on. So is biodiversity the major piece that we need to look at in those particular aspects? I would desperately want one of these, but for Network Crowd, not personally, I desperately want one of these, although well, maybe I should convince my husband that we could have something somewhere on our house or our garage. Is a green roof. So in Southern, one of the things that we identified is that sustainability hadn't been costed for possibly as well as it could have been for CP6. So we put together what we called a green fund. So projects, depots, anyone had the opportunity to put an application in and receive funding to carry out an initiative. So if you ever go to Clapham Junction on one of the platforms, I want to say it's like a bay platform, there's a bit that overhangs at the they've got some planters there to make the area more aesthetically pleasing. I think one depot, in memory of some of their staff that had passed away that had worked at the depot, they put like a memorial garden in and somewhere where people could go and sit and reflect. And that was funded through the Green Fund. Obviously, it has well-being benefits as well as biodiversity ones if we're like putting some pollinating plants in there. And then this one was for an Access for All scheme, and I really need to follow up to see if they've put in their green roofs. But it was about on the areas around the lift structures of putting green roofs in. And I've talked about that with the signalling teams in the past. And I said, oh, you know, you could put like green roofs on REVs. Well, you know, and they're like, what, paint it? I'm like, no, you can have a, and then it's like, well, how would we get a lawnmower up there? I'm like, no, you don't need, it's a sort of safe maintaining, but it also has those properties for insulation and things like that. But again, we need to have manufacturers because are we adding loading to those particular things? But are there, and like on the railway, if we had green roofs or that type of things on some of our buildings, that provides a stepping stone for wildlife to come across and some pollinators. So there's different things we can do, but often we were required to do these at the planning stage because all too often it's an idea that comes in way too late when we're delivering our works, and it's not something that we've either financed or that is possible within the time. But there's a number of different things. I think this one was just under 10k for the whole project, but there are there different things because you see it and I notice it. For those of you here in the room, if you look across at the building opposite, and I've not been up to the 6th floor for us, they have like these garden areas. So actually, are we using some of our buildings? Can we, you know, is there access to use them as garden areas for wildlife? So there is some of the environmental examples, and there's loads and loads more from very minor ones. One of the ones I could have put in and didn't think about it is we've got recycling bins for PPE. So in a number of our depots and offices. But it's quite useful when you go into the bins, actually some of that stuff is brand new. So you feel like waking it out and going, well, if people need spare PPE, go and have a look in the bin because there might be like your size in the bin, which is completely new because either someone's left and they've never used it or whatever it may be. So we have those. The other one I thought I'd touch on is the social aspect. So in CP6, we have a number of work streams when it comes to environment and sustainability and the social aspect. And Kat O'Malley in my team looks after the social value piece. And that is anything from volunteering. So we encourage people to do volunteering, and we do have volunteering targets. And we're not doing too badly against our targets, but it's always good if people can. And then CAT will chase us if we've not put into Oracle, because that's where the stats come from. Our charity partnerships, so we have partnerships with Shelter as part of our Roots Out of Homelessness, Big Issue, Crisis, and Railway Children from memory, if those are the ones I can remember. Looking at the community impacts, skills and employability, and I think this is one area from an engineering perspective that always works really well, that whole kind of STEM activities around engineering elements. And then social value at stations, which is the one behind here, and measuring social value. CAT's done a lot of work, and there'll be opportunities, I think, again, to work with Shelter. So they did pop-up shops in the stations last year. So they just had like their charity shop at a station, gave commuters a different experience in the stations, also opened up our charity partners to maybe a wider audience for looking at those various aspects, or you can do tree planting. So I was sat with the SLT today, so the safety leadership team for capital delivery and works delivery, and they were like, tree planting in November, but won't it be cold and won't the ground be frozen? And we're like, well, that is tree planting season is in the winter. So I don't know how I'm going to convince the exec to go out for those, but there's often opportunities and even things. So this is our team, some of our team, when we did the Christmas jumpers, the little things about engaging those. And Kat, along with another colleague in our team, put together this to illustrate what social value means to us and for us to understand it, and a good way to communicate it generally to our teams. So it has some things around notifications, but not just saying, oh, hey, here's Network Rail, we're coming to chop down a load of trees, or we're coming to do some noisy works. For some of the projects, they've included like some wild seed flowers or something, which has just been a little bit more engaging, trying to link with our residents. There's a bit about making sure that we're using battery operated equipment, having surveyed for our wildlife, and then reducing the noise impacts and air pollution impacts. Oh, is that what it's done?
It's the obligatory pause.
I know what to do.
Stuff. For those on the call, if you could bear with us a second, we're having a slight monitor malfunction in the room. Okay. If you bear with us a second, sorry about this, we'll just drop out the presentation for you.
Oh, we're doing so well.
As long as it normally does.
No, we're all sharing. Yeah. Internet facilities now. I've never had that before.
Try just unplugging. Get it back. I have to ask you to focus around here. Yeah, it's just not coming up. Something about that definition of trying the same thing and expecting a different result. Is,
Shall I move mine?
I can. Are you okay if I turn my computer around and you'll be able to see that?
The beauty of technology, isn't it? So on the social value, there's also things, and I won't go through all of them, but it's on the it's in the pack. Things like number 5 is around using some of our areas. So if you ever go down to Bodmin Parkway, there's a very nice cafe in the signal box. So the signal box has been turned into a cafe, and I'm sure you guys have got other examples. At Ashvale, we turned a relay room into a bat house. Years ago. I don't know what's happened to it. I feel like I need to investigate those particular things. So it's looking at all of the various things that we do around our social value. We also do things around working with local artists. So again, that whole graffiti piece to minimise graffiti, putting those various aspects in, and therefore reducing trespass, safety concerns. So there's lots of things in the social value space, but some of them will be about, you know, giving redundant materials and getting them. In the past, projects have taken like cable drums and made them into tables and stools for a nursery. Again, minimising the amount of waste that we generate, but also providing that benefit. And on here, on this slide, it is just showing you some of the things that we do. I'm going to see if I can move everyone. I can move you there on my slide. So all the volunteering hours that we've had this year, oh no, I think it might be CP6, sorry, has resulted in just under £82,000 worth of social value. So us going and doing stuff, and whether that's as individuals or as a group, all the training that we've done in CP6, so all the hours where we have done either an hour's training session, or we've done our 1-day IEMA courses or the 5-day IEMA courses, is just shy of 100k of social value. So we've provided that benefit. And the last one is about working with a community rail project. So there are 12 people that have access to that community rail project, and there is a £21,500 social value benefit, and where they do stakeholder engagement, there's a further 790. So that it's sometimes very difficult to quantify those, and we often get challenged about what are those particular things. And there are a couple of examples, but say we went into a school and did a safety briefing, we can put that on our rail social value tool and it'll come out with a value. And that's looking at things like, well, actually the children more aware, so they're not going to trespass, so that has an impact, and therefore you don't have to get BTP involved, it doesn't impact our trains. Or if we're doing some training and awareness around a business, does that then mean actually people are more aware of aspects? Are they going to be healthier? Is it going to help with development opportunities? So there are things where they would look at, well, actually, if we're educating people in certain areas, and whether it's getting people into apprenticeships and graduate schemes, you know, are there things where actually then they're not looking to have to be funded by the state, they've got their own funds, and therefore those services aren't required? Or if we're doing other things, then medical services aren't required, so it's a saving to the NHS as much as it's a saving to the business. So there's a number of different ways that they calculate that, but it's just showing there's a value outside of what we see, and it's not always tangible to say the overarching benefit. In fact, so very conscious of time. So the last bit, that was a little bit about, it's more about personal impacts, because I quite like that. Some people will go, well, I work in this team, but for example, I've had, I'm a team organizer. Well, you've probably got a lot of power as team organizer. So there's lots of things you could do, like, if it's ordering, or, I don't have much of an impact. Well, there might be things that you can help with. I mean, this is one for me. I do like to send a thank you email. It's just not good. But this was quite interesting. Someone had asked me to work out or find out about the carbon footprint of an email. And this is the challenge to say, well, we send out so many emails, but just that average email, how much carbon that is. And if it's spam or if you've got an attachment, and we love an attachment, don't we, for certain things. And this is all to account for those data centers and the computers filtering and sending information. And yeah, the interesting one is if each adult in the UK sent one less thank you email a day, it would save basically the equivalent of just under 82,000 flights to Madrid. It's astonishing, isn't it, that you would, and I quite like that example. And when we were talking to some of the exec team in the safety leadership team, they were saying about making it real. So if we talk about carbon savings and say we've saved X amount of tons of carbon, that is the equivalent to 5 hot air balloons, so people can properly visualize it rather than going, well, what is 16,433 tons of carbon? Oh, that equates to this many flights, because you can see that. I mean, one of the engineers, bless them, said, Maria, why don't you at the bottom of your email say to save on emails and carbon? I will not be sending a thank you email, but I am grateful for whatever you have done. That kind of thing. And I have seen someone put that. And we've done this as a safety moment or a sustainability moment at one of our sessions. And I saw it on a contractor's the bottom of their signature box, because they'd said, do you know how much it takes to send emails? I said, thank you email. But yeah, so if you're ever struggling for a safety moment or a safety conversation, and I've also spun it round and brought the health and well-being in, because you come back off holiday and you're like, seriously, my emails? So there's that whole stress of, oh my God, I've got all of these emails. And sometimes it's better to talk to people, pick up the phone rather than send that email. That's a personal thing. Also, another thing that you can do is you can work out your carbon footprint. So the WWF, and there are other carbon footprints out there, do the carbon footprint, and they ask you a series of questions like, do you buy locally sourced food? Do you recycle? How much equipment do you have in the house? And it's then looking. So the example on the screen is my carbon footprint sort of around COVID time. I have to say it would be worse now because I've been on a few holidays this year, so I've flown. So that wouldn't have helped my carbon footprint. But it then gives you a report about things. So are you on average? Are you less than average when it comes to the UK? I think it didn't help when they said, what's the temperature of your house? And the temperature of my house, because it's a fairly new build, is higher than 18 degrees just because of the insulation. So it's well insulated. It's not that I've got the heating on. It's just the way it's situated. But that's the sort of negative side. That's the bit where do we have the impact. But we often talk about the negative impacts that we have. And I know we've talked about some of the positive stuff today. The other one for me is the handprint. So actually, what are all the positive things we're doing? So are you doing a meat-free Monday with your family, or have you decided actually once a week my lunch will not have any meat in it? Are you making sure the lights are switched off? I don't have children. I have a husband who I go around switching lights off after him and telling him that he needs to charge things during the day because we have solar panels when the sun is shining. So we're using the solar panel energy rather than stuff off the grid. And it's quite nice. So I like solar panels on our house because I'm like, oh, from a sustainability point of view, that's good. He likes it because every so many months he gets a check, not a massive one, like we wouldn't be able to retire on it, from British Gas saying, thank you for the energy you put back onto the grid, here's some money. But are they, do you cycle to work? Do you regularly use the train? Do you recycle your materials? Do you take your reusable bag to the shopping. I mean, I am terrible. I do judge people who go, yeah, can I have 5 bags? They're reusable. Do you do this every time? But that kind of thing, are they the little things that we already do that make a positive contribution? And I quite like this. So I have slightly tweaked this saying. It mainly was around waste management. But for me, it's not about the likes of the sustainability team or me doing it perfectly, because I won't do it perfectly. I like to go on holiday, so I'm going to get on a plane. If I was truly sustainable, I would be living the good life with a my vegetable patch and all of those particular things. But actually, it's about all of us working together and what are those small changes that we can have, and whether that's individually or within our working areas, our disciplines. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Maria. Apologies again for those in the room that experienced the IT issues firsthand, but I'll give the first opportunity to those. For those that are here, are there any questions you want to pose to Maria at all?
Well, there was one I've been involved in when I retired. The value of we were extracting things to achieve the aim, but to be as cheap as possible. Now I can see where if you've got comparing alternatives and maybe they're a similar price, but they've got these added environmental sustainability aspects to them that would tip the balance. But when it's not quite like that, and how do you make a decision? How do you put a value on the sustainability factors in a situation where it's not as simple as that first situation I described?
And this is where whole life costing needs to come in. And I think we look at whole life costing from very much a cost perspective. And I think it's that challenge of, or is the maintenance period longer? So if you don't have to go and maintain something so regularly, does that then mean you're having a potential positive impact because you're not putting people in a position of danger, because people aren't having to go out on site and maintain that particular impact? If you're not, then the materials you're going to use, you won't need to change them as regularly. So I think for more complex things, it is about doing that whole life cycle costing piece, and looking at that. And sometimes it's difficult for us because we work in like yearly budgets potentially, or 5 yearly budgets. And so how do we see those benefits? Because sometimes if the return in investment or the payback time is longer than either a year, 5 years, whatever it is more difficult to sell those particular aspects. But sometimes it might be a reputational piece that actually reputationally it stands us in good stead. The number, I suppose, of factors to then think about and go through that sort of question piece. I don't know whether that.
I'll ask a follow-up. There is a question, Alex. I'll come to you in a second, but I've got kind of a question based on what you're saying, Maria. Do you think momentum plays a part as well in terms of convincing people beyond? Do you think there's a sort of a momentum behind some of the changes that make the approval for making further changes easier?
Yeah, and I think we have to make it easy for people. This is the other thing, and I think
I was just going to say, I know from being involved with the composite sleepers, they're actually more expensive to buy than wood sleepers, like the hardwood softwoods. But you take the life cycle, composite sleeper, it's going to last 50 years, where a hardwood softwood sleeper is going to last 20. But you're not going to see the benefits for 20 years, never mind 5 years. But obviously this is part of like the bigger picture, isn't it?
Yeah. And some people don't like change, so it's getting people into that mindset of change, and then saying, well, yeah, they are more expensive, but you don't need to change them so often. So we're trying to be more efficient because we're it's taxpayers' money. But yeah, there's the knock-on thing, so we then don't have to take people out. So the project, there's the materials, there's the carbon, and is there a good news story there that says actually we're a responsible business because we're looking at those opportunities, and that isn't a quantifiable, I suppose, benefit that you can go, well, actually that reputation means positive.
Thank you. Can I go to Alex?
Yeah, I've got another question after.
Okay, you'll do. Alex, your arm must be aching now. I know you're not a shy wallflower, so you'll be happy to ask the question in person, so far away.
Yeah, hi Maria. Yeah, sorry, this is coming quite good timing for me because I'm actually doing a university project around decarbonisation and energy use at the moment. And one of the things I've been looking at is around perception, awareness and attitudes. So I did a survey across a number of our frontline staff and band 1 to 4. And there was some really interesting results at that. If you wanted to see it, I'm more than welcome to share that with you. But what was quite apparent was that, you know, the vast majority, you know, for decarbonisation, energy reduction is incredibly important. But the awareness and how often we're talking about it and how we're promoting it, it was kind of a 50-50. And in some cases, you know, people weren't talking about it at all. But interesting, not like 90% of people believe that their behaviours would change if, you know, we talked about it more, there was more promotion of sustainability. So some of the conclusions from that, you know, I'm looking at sort of like, we have mandatory training within Network Rail, but we don't have anything for sustainability that's mandatory at the moment. We have D&I champions. We don't have any, you know, to the best of my knowledge, sustainability champions or anything like that. So the question really is, from your perspective, how important do you think it is that we do those kind of initiatives, to, you know, particularly with frontline maintenance and all that kind of stuff, to change people's behaviours?
I think that is my one thing, and I have been talking to the specialists in my team and said, I want you out and about and very visible. So I'm a great believer in doing the training, and funnily enough, I had the challenge the other day about, well, shouldn't we have mandatory training for environment? I said we've asked in Southern, but everyone says we've got enough mandatory training, so they don't want to add another one. I often promote environmental training and deliver it myself because I like to have that, and it's to people who want to know it, and the message is passed on. But there is definitely a piece where we can improve around comms, and again that sits with me. So this is fantastic news and stuff that we can take back and promote, and yeah, how that message and information gets out to people, because yeah, there's things that we're doing but we're probably not telling people how much we're doing and the benefits.
Yeah, and like I say, if you want me to share with you, that's fine. Because, you know, just an observation, and then, you know, I know you're going to the next question, but, you know, how often do we walk into a depot, and I see it, where someone's left the light on, someone's left the heating on, or the air conditioning or whatever? Would they do that in their own home? It's like the first argument, but, you know, we do see it all the time, and it's that sort of stuff that, how do we stop that? And it's you went through it with that personal impact stuff, and as well, you know, getting that message through to people.
Thank you, and yeah, we'd love to see that, because I know the team, that would be really useful for us. So
where does the recording go? Sorry, because I could use some of this. Last thing
Goes on the PWI website.
Okay.
I'm sure if you drop Maria a line in return for some information, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Maria
I've got loads
trade.
I've got loads of information.
No problem. All right, thank you.
So Rob, final question before we
Yeah.
wrap up.
Sure. So I've just bought an electric car. Okay. I don't think I heard you talk about electric cars within the workforce, or vans or whatever. And I've been a person who's worked from the bottom up. I can say that there's a lot of idling that goes on, waiting for possessions to start, etc., etc. And I don't blame them, people, because during the winter it's freezing cold and whatnot. Has that been thought about how we could keep people warm but not idle, or is that like a massive subject?
Do you know, that is a very good question, because yeah, the amount of, like you say, idling.
Yeah.
We are rolling out our electric vehicle programme.
Yeah.
So part of the team I work in is around the decarb and electric vehicles. That
Yeah, I suppose this is not a question, it's more of just a suggestion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm
we
just
probably
like,
haven't
yeah,
really.
just like, I've just watched your whole presentation and I never saw cars can make, this is not a criticism at all, but I just thought, you know, like, oh, just made me think about it.
There's a lot of waiting around.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's nature of the beast as well.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
and this is it. Yeah, you do. How do you balance those particular?
Because I sort of feel like it's like keeping people warm is an essential necessity.
Yeah.
But making the carbon footprint of the company bigger is a challenge we're trying to we're literally fighting against. So yeah, how can we like get to a status quo?
And that's it. As soon as we go for electric vehicles, our electricity consumption is going to go up. Isn't it? Because everyone's plugging in their electric vans to get them to their work sites.
Yes.
But actually, we won't be using diesel. And again, what are the benefits of those? And do people appreciate that?
And interestingly, it costs more carbon footprint to make an electric vehicle than it does petrol or diesel. But by the time you've done 6,000 miles on electric, you've paid for the you've diminished all of the carbon footprint you would have made if it was a diesel petrol. Yeah. It's like something I found out when I was buying my electric car.
See, people look into these things. And I think
Yeah.
there's a hook, isn't it? People want to know about this.
Yes, absolutely.
Funnily enough, going back to my survey, actually, that's what people thought was the easiest thing to fix, was vehicles, Rob.
So Alex?
I said that funnily enough, what people thought was the easiest thing to fix out of the stuff that I've been doing for university. And
Great minds think alike, Alex.
You're catching up.
We better wrap this up, really. Thank you again, Maria. I really appreciate the effort you put into this. What have I learned? I have an aspiration to go, and I can't remember the name of the area in Brazil, but I have a real aspiration. It's on our list. It's a fantastic wildlife area in Brazil, the name of which I can't remember, but there's a chance of seeing jaguars. And it kind of reminded me of this talk that I've got to start advocating composite bearers more, to have a chance of it still being there when I can afford to go there. Really, is a reminder. I think it was just so interesting when you started to talk about the social value that you introduced. It just feels like, where can you draw the boundaries? That must be a challenge in itself in terms of making, what can you make the most impact with the effort that you've got available in terms of realms of it. It was just something I hadn't appreciated. But the last thing that I'm going to take away from this talk is I can now substantiate and evidence my desire to ban and reply all but for emails. So I'll take that away from that. So on that slightly flippant note, for those on the call or certainly in the room, if we can just thank Maria for her efforts, which are much appreciated in the typical staff. And hope to see you virtually or preferably in person for the next meeting, which I'll confirm details soon. So thank you.